Hello and welcome to the Sectigo Identity First Security Summit. I'm Tim Callan, Chief Compliance Officer at Sectigo, and I'm sitting here with Jason Soroko, CTO of PKI at Sectigo. How are you doing today, Jay?
Doing great, Tim. Thanks for having me.
So today we are here to talk about, the title of this session is Updating Assumptions on Secure Certificate Management, Cloud or On-Premise. And basically what we're here to talk about today is it more secure to have your services in a cloud system, or is it more secure to have it on your own floor, on your own premises? So before we get into that, let me just remind everybody that you do have a Speak to Us button. And if you do click the Speak to Us button, please include your questions or comments right there. And Jay and I have an associate who is prepared to respond to you and answer your questions in real time. So with that, let's get underway. So Jason, on-premise systems are under attack.
Are they ever? I remember when the public cloud was fairly fresh and new. I remember being in rooms with CISOs, CIOs, directors of IT who said to me flat out, I will never touch that with a 1,000,000-foot pole because it's not near to my chest. I don't have complete control of it with my endpoint security systems. I can't monitor it as well. Fast forward to right now, I don't hear anybody saying that. However, the reason why we're doing this webinar is because of the fact that some people with PKI seems to be the last bastion of, oh goodness, I need that box. I need to be able to go to the server room.
I need to be able to touch it with my hand. Right.
It's the last system standing in your server room that you really feel needs to be close to you. And I think we've got to change some of those ideas.
Yeah, and so I think we have some examples here, and I don't know if we need to go into them all, but these are recent examples where the fact that the vulnerability was actually inside of your in the walls on-premise network itself was part of the enabler for the bad guys. And so, for instance, we like to talk about the print nightmare attack, right? Where you use the MS print spooler to get in, and then you go, well, what are they going to do with my print spooler? Waste my toner, right? But once you're in, you move around. You have lateral motion available. Yeah.
A lot of people think that it had to do with the printer itself. It doesn't. Mm-hmm. The print nightmare attack, everybody's Windows system has a printer spooler on their computer. It's actually a binary that runs as a service. And by the way, that service runs as the system user, which is another way of saying it, the God user on your computer. The printer spooler actually has more rights than you do on that computer. And what's the other thing that a printer spooler does? Well, it takes in a printer file and then it spits it out to the printer, which means it is, by definition, it changes. It changes in size, meaning it's very difficult to monitor.
Right.
And so therefore, how many printer spoolers do you have in your enterprise? Well, the answer to that question is, how many Windows computers do you have in your enterprise? Because every single one of them has it. And so perfect example of when I was first learning how to do offensive security, the printer spooler was my place to go because it was just such a juicy place to infect and then launch my attacks from. But Tim, let's talk about the first two real quickly, right? For those of you who were some of the last people, for whatever reason, could be totally legitimate, who were running, say, Microsoft Exchange for your email system in your enterprise. Not uncommon. Well, a lot of organizations went to the cloud. And for everybody who felt, you know what, I just don't trust the cloud, I prefer my on-prem, guess what? Your I don't have to tell any of you the amount of pain that you've just been through to have to deal with Microsoft Exchange on-premise. The on-premise product was, let's face it, less supported than the cloud product. The actual patching of it was incredibly painful. And the bad guys used that for incredible amounts of lateral movement. This is the thing that I don't think that technical journalists talk about enough. It's not just the attack on the on-prem thing itself, it's the lateral movements in your enterprise after that, which then leads to the SolarWinds attack. Tim, this is one of my favorite examples, because who caught this? Well, it was the good folks over at Mandiant.
Yeah.
It was exactly. It was called FireEye at the time.
Yeah.
And so think about this for a moment, right? For this was basically a system that was an appliance within their enterprise that was monitoring for security purposes. One day, apparently, it was Kevin Mandia who actually told the story. They were sitting in a boardroom. Somebody came into the boardroom, broke up the meeting, and said, "Hey, we think we're under attack. We don't know where it's coming from." Fast forward, turns out it was the security appliance. It was the last place anybody looked. In other words, even Kevin Mandia's team, who are maybe the best in the world, felt that their on-premise system was the most trustable. If Kevin Mandia's team were scratching their heads, what hope do the rest of us have?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And the fourth one, I'll just throw this one away real quickly. This is a 20-plus-year-old attack on all on-premise systems that allows this kinds of lateral movement within Windows systems. We won't get into the details, but all I'm trying to tell you is there's a ton of beachheads that bad guys can get onto in your enterprise on-premise, and then launch attacks on the rest of your internal systems.
Right. And in the news recently, I don't know how much we need to get into this, but there were a lot of headlines late last year about an attack called Petit Potam.
Tim, exactly. This is, you can read the details. We provide the CVE numbers and the KB numbers, but if this is not something that you're aware of and you run Microsoft CA, you have homework to do. Google these numbers and follow Microsoft's instructions, and you have a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
The most important thing you have to know here is that you need to mitigate problems in your configurations related to Microsoft CA. And basically, these are the reason why this is slide 2, essentially, is because it's a perfect example of an on-premise PKI that is having enormous problems with its configurations in order to be able to keep secure. I can almost guarantee you have some kind of problem right now. And if you were listening to the last Black Hat, there is an enormous number of tools to be able to both diagnose and also automate the attack on bad configurations, Tim.
Gotcha. So does proximity equate to security? Cloud computing has become integral to enterprise environments, and running it online is now the new norm. So we're going to walk into some specific aspects, and we're going to compare on-prem to cloud, so we can look at them side by side. The first one is overall security profile. So again, on-prem, there has been this idea that if I somehow have physical control of the box, that's going to translate to more control, more visibility, and more security, and that the cloud is sort of a way where I can't see it and bad things could happen and I would never know. What's the myth versus reality there, Jay?
I think the myth is you might have monitoring tools, you might have endpoint security tools that are legacy, you might have n number of investments that you've made for in-house computing resources, including your PKI. And those investments that you've made might give you a big warm and fuzzy feeling that, hey, because I run those things in-house, I have a real control over what's going on. The reality of it is, I've just told you, the number of attacks you will not be able to defend against, the number of attacks that come from lateral movement, the number of attacks even in your own PKI configuration as a huge issue, really erase any form of warm and fuzzy you should have about a PKI that's running in-house. And so therefore, leave it to the experts. I think cloud PKI, just like all other forms of digital transformation, it's where it's going. It's what's going to allow you to scale. It's going to allow you to take advantage of more use cases. And in terms of security, because the people who have set up this cloud PKI probably know what they're doing, they probably have done a better job at you than you have of actually protecting that resource. And
Yep.
if you doubt that, please check previous slides.
Yeah, I think that's an important point there, Jay. Just as a quick reminder, be sure to use the Speak to Us button if you have questions or comments. And so next, perimeter defense. If I have an on-prem system, I have a very distinct perimeter. I have a firewall, if you will, and I feel like I can secure that, right? I put a big wall around things and I feel more secure, as opposed to in the cloud, which is fundamentally perimeterless, or it's what we call a software-defined perimeter. So once again, what's the myth versus reality here, Jay?
Tim, unless you're some specialized military outfit and you have such an incredible amount of isolation in your network, chances are your network is simply too flat. The reason why your network is too flat is simply because, and I've spoken to a lot of networking people and I've done a lot of networking in my own life, interoperability inside of an enterprise is paramount. In other words, productivity of your employees, allowing them to get from A to Z, very important. If you lock down your network too much, it's a pain in the butt.
Yeah.
Problem is, that ability for interoperability is you're not just made your own
the
life
attacker's easy. Ability as well, yes.
And so therefore, having something in the cloud, how do you now get to the cloud? Tim, I'm going to try to simplify this whole slide into a statement, which is there's an enormous movement. In fact, this is one of the principles of zero trust, but we can leave that to the side for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
Logging into resources, authenticating into critical resources used to be done at the network level. In other words, you're probably logging into Active Directory, right?
Yep.
For your in-house enterprise. And for cloud applications, you're logging in at the application level. In other words, a compromise at the network level is going to allow you into that very flat network.
Give you everything.
And a compromise at the cloud is basically isolated to that cloud app.
Give you that app. Right. Exactly. So
there's a reason why this is a fundamental principle of zero trust, and this is the way everybody should be going right now.
There you go. Operating requirements. So if you're running on-premise PKI, you're dependent on the capabilities that you have in your house, right? You have the servers. In the world of cloud, then obviously you have access to whatever resources and capabilities that cloud service has access to.
Tim, here's a question for you. How many hardcore true PKI specialists are there in existence? I bet you and I have met a very large percentage of them. And the fact is, it's a rare resource. And so therefore, if you're doing anything critical, such as PKI, my goodness, please scale yourself so that you're not having to hire an entire PKI expert staff. Leave it to the experts.
Fair enough. I think that says it all. Next, configuration. So Jay, obviously with on-premise PKI, you have to configure everything for yourself, right? It's your stuff. It's in your system. Once we get to a cloud-based PKI, certainly you have a degree of control, but you also have either some things that are just plain handled for you, or where you have an expert involved who's helping you decide how to configure things.
Yeah, Tim, we had a webinar very recently that I would invite everybody to go take a look at, which are common pitfalls of PKI. We talked about things such as incorrectly chosen cryptographic algorithms, incorrectly chosen key lengths. Those are misconfiguration problems at the certificate level. But there are also misconfigurations that are possible at the level of the dependency on Active Directory, for example, within your on-premise PKI. And I would like to point out the most recent Black Hat conference, where a bunch of very, very competent white hat researchers created diagnostic tools to look for these bad configurations. But keep in mind, they also created automated attack tools to take advantage of bad configurations, of which are very, very common. So what I'd like to argue is, even if you have the best PKI staff possible, which is incredibly difficult to hire, it's a very rare skill, I would say that your on-premise PKI you should not look at as, hey, I can touch that server box like we joked about earlier. You should look at that as, oh my goodness, do I have the competency to deal with all of these configuration issues that come with PKI? Maybe I should be leaving it to people who do this all day long. Those are the only people who have that competency. Therefore, cloud PKI configurations
Gives you
lower
that
your attack
opportunity.
footprint.
Yeah.
It lowers your attack footprint. It lowers your chance of making those dumb errors we talked about in the common pitfalls. And overall, Tim, I think that we need to be following what the white hat community is telling us, which is configurations might be coming to the top of the list of PKI problems. Therefore, cloud PKI has a big advantage.
There you go. And it also has a big advantage in price, right? Cloud, one of the things we've seen throughout different areas of technology is cloud services are just more efficient. And that definitely translates to the price, the money that you're going to have to spend.
Tim, how long ago? It wasn't that long ago when we heard the term, free Microsoft CA. And I think if we look at that today, we now know that the return on investment was actually pretty rough in terms of, it's not just the hardware, it's not just the expensive staff that you've had to keep for all those years, but also you had, what's the return on the number of use cases that you were able to use that on-premise PKI for? In reality, right, modern cloud PKI gets rid of all those previous problems, the hardware, the staff, and the limitations of the use cases. I think it doesn't make sense anymore, going forward from today, to really look at on-premise PKI unless you have some kind of incredibly specialized use case, which most enterprises do not.
Yeah. So security risks. So discovery and knowledge of attacks, I think is another one, right? If I'm an island and I'm running my own PKI and somebody does get in and get it done, I might never know. I might be compromised. I might be compromised for a long time. And certainly we've heard lots of stories of this kind of thing happening to people over the years. If you're in a cloud environment, you've got this advantage that somebody is keeping an eye on all of this and is very tuned to making sure that there aren't any breaches or other problems.
Tim, if you've ever read any of Mandiant's, Verizon's, Symantec's, so many really, really good incident handling reports that you'll see now. I think one of the things that has become incredibly clear is that you as an enterprise might be the last group of people to figure out that you have been compromised. Mm-hmm. That's simply the truth now. That's a sad fact, but it's true. And so therefore, with that being now common knowledge to everyone, I honestly would ask you the question, how in the world can you then work that out in your head that something that's on premise is somehow more secure?
Yeah.
And somehow has less security risk. Keep in mind, one of the biggest changes we're seeing in computing today in terms of security posture is logging in at the network level and attaching to Active Directory for interoperability purposes does not lead to better security. What leads to better security is authenticating at the application level, and Cloud PKI is that by default. You would be authenticating to your Cloud PKI without that dependency and the risks associated with authenticating at the network level. It's a major, major principle of zero trust. But even if you're not one of the subscribers to zero trust, you have to understand the chances of you actually monitoring for attacks in your own system. I tell you what, you're overestimating yourself.
Yeah. And why would you put that on your massive list of things to do? Now you've got another thing you have to do also. Configuration control. So this is an interesting one because you might think if you're running an on-premise system that you would have more control. And we're going to attack that viewpoint a little, aren't we, Jay?
Tim, what I would say is when it comes to the control of your configuration,
right?
One of the things that you have to keep in mind is what's the chance that you as an organization have a better set of eyes than an actual PKI vendor? Chances are it's less.
Right.
And not only that, but again, I'm repeating myself, the white hat community has told us that configuration problems have quickly become the number one problem on on-prem PKI. Well, so, therefore, you might have made the fallacy of thinking, because it's close to me, the fallacy of proximity, therefore those configurations somehow are not going to be messed with, or I've made the correct configurations. Right. The white hat researchers have told us that this is the opposite. Your ability to control the configurations, your ability to know what are the right configurations, that's only going to be in the hands of the truest experts, and therefore leave it to the experts in the cloud.
Yeah, and on here on the right, under a cloud PKI, we've used the word governance, and I think that's a specifically chosen word, because the point would be you still can make the key decisions. You can decide how you want your PKI to work, and then you've got a partner who ensures that it actually works the way you're expecting it to work and you think it to work. So it's not about losing that decision-making capability. It's about ensuring that those decisions you made are genuinely realized correctly in the real world.
Right? Super point. What is your business outcome? You define. Yeah. You're the one who's going to define that outcome, but it's going to be other people probably who are going to help you to get there.
Yes, exactly right. So, I think we've hit these points, so maybe we can hit them quickly. But so there wind up being, a bunch of arguments in favor of cloud-based PKI over on-prem, and we could probably just rattle down this. You don't have to have these specialists, right, that are so hard to get and rare and difficult to get. You can prevent yourself from having CapEx, right? You don't have to own hardware and install it in racks and worry about UPSs and air conditioning and all that stuff. It's just more cost effective. Your operating expenses go down. You're much more protected by things like downtime. And you're on premise, you don't have this whole lateral movement inside your network risk, which we started with, which is such a big risk factor. Do you want to add anything here, Jay?
Tim, for anybody who believes that their on-premise systems are more secure than a system in the cloud, especially for organizations that run Active Directory, I don't believe you.
There you go. I like that. I don't believe you. We'll just go straight to the point. So let's do a quick plug for our podcast. I think we mentioned earlier in this session, if you did like this conversation, Jason and I have a popular podcast focused on PKI and security. It's called Root Causes, a PKI and security podcast. Go to where you listen to podcasts and search for us, and you can find us there. Please, subscribe and listen. And we have lots of episodes, hundreds of episodes. We cover all kinds of different topics related to certificates, cryptography, PKI, digital identity, etc. And we'd love to have you, and we'd love to have you listen to what we say. And with that, I think we're at the end of our session. This was our comparison of on-premises versus PKI, and we will make sure that all of your questions get answered. I'm Tim Callan, Chief Compliance Officer at Sectigo, and thank you for joining me today, Jason.
You, Tim.